So, my name is David Bell, and I'm privileged to be a director of Distillery, and have been for a long time. And Distillery and I have wanted to interview this man for a long time. I'm here with Jay Goebel from Trade Desk,
That's right.
who's all about data partnerships. And so, Jay, tell us about your journey
Yeah.
and how you got here.
Yeah, sure.
Tell us about your background and how you got to the Trade Desk.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Jay Goebel with the Trade Desk. I've been at the Trade Desk for about 5.5 years. I came here from the Oracle Data Cloud, and I was at a company called Datalogics prior to the Oracle acquisition. I found my way into data at Datalogics at a pivot point in my career. I had previously been a brand manager with Nestle, where I marketed Hot Pockets, of all things. I like to tell people that if you get any collection of people in a room, I've probably eaten more Hot Pockets than all of those people put together, because that was part of my job, was developing new products. Prior to that, I worked for Gatorade in the PepsiCo organization. So I went from helping people maximize their performance to helping people fill their stomachs while they sit on couches. The pivot point in my career happened at a time when digital marketing was just starting to emerge. I remember having debates internally at Nestle about whether we should develop a Facebook page, and talking to some of the older marketers. They just couldn't understand why we would need something like that. Of course, I thought it was a brilliant idea. At Nestle, I was privileged to be invited to help put on the marketing conference that they ran annually for their entire organization. And we decided at that time, because of that Facebook debate, to focus on digital marketing and how effective it could be. The question we tried to answer for all Nestle marketers was, how can we feel comfortable about targeting an individual, putting an ad in front of them, and then measuring the impact afterwards? And unfortunately, we never answered that question at the conference. But fast forward a few months, the business was down. They had decided to move the Nestle division from Denver to Cleveland, Ohio. And I thought, not sure I want to go to Cleveland. Really interested in this data thing. Started doing some networking and found Datalogics. And in my interview, they said, we have a relationship with Kroger, Dunnhumby, 8451. We can target people. We can put an ad in front of them, and then we can measure back. And I thought, hallelujah, I just found the thing that we were looking for. I'm going to jump into this. And I did that 15 years ago. And here I am now at the Trade Desk, doing that every day with great companies like Distillery.
Great. Well, your marketing background from two great marketing companies gives you a lens that most data people and most partnership people don't have.
That's right.
And I bet that makes you feel super confident about what you're doing at Trade Desk.
It gives me a lot of confidence. Thank you for recognizing that. I spend a lot of time thinking about some of the mentors that I grew up underneath at Gatorade, who helped me think about segmentation and messaging to fit certain needs and wants, and how they would dial up certain messages at times based on how their business was performing. And I translate that a lot into how I think about audience creation and working with data partners. I'm really, really pleased in what we're doing with Distillery right now about the speed at which we can turn things around and literally take briefs and plug them into machines that you all have built and build custom segments in the moment. I think that is really where we're headed in this business. And you're right to kind of point to my background and how I was brought up and the things that I think about that help me conceive of opportunities and see the opportunity in the partnership that we had.
Great. What attracted you to the Trade Desk, and how did they recruit you?
Yeah. I was at a time in my career where it was time to move on from Oracle, to be frank. I went from big company Pepsi to big company Nestle to really small company Datalogics, and I just love that environment. It was tiny, it was startup-y, we were on the forefront. We were one of the first to do targeting and measurement in Facebook. That was just so exciting to ride that wave and be a part of that. And then Oracle bought us, and that was exciting. But then we were slowly becoming Oracle. And I had this concern that one day I would wake up and Oracle would decide, well, we're in a lot of different businesses. We don't think we're going to do this digital marketing thing anymore. And so I started to think about new opportunities. The trade desk felt a lot like Datalogix when I joined it. It was small, nimble, hungry, startup-y, just really going after the opportunity in a way that I didn't see other companies doing that. And I was fortunate enough to have some really good connections from Oracle that had come over to Trade Desk. So it was an easy transition for me. And then, interestingly, my premonition about Oracle actually came true. So I got out of the business, and then it was, a couple weeks before coming to Kansas, we decided to shut it down a couple years ago. And so my timing was well timed, and coming to the trade desk has really afforded me an opportunity that I've really not had anywhere else in my career, where I've been able to deploy some of those things that I learned in early days that you talked about in the previous question, and really put that into practice and just really help grow the opportunity we have to target better. So
Great.
I really enjoyed it.
So one of the things I always admired about the trade desk, and I used to include it in the speech, was trade desk was maniacally focused.
Yes.
And the two things that stuck out for me at the launch was, one, an absolute commitment to the agency community.
Yes.
Without any equivocation.
Yes.
And the second was a brilliant UI.
Yeah.
And those two things, I think, in the beginning launched it.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of your partnerships at this time do you work with agencies?
Yes.
Because you worked with agencies at both Hot Pockets and Gatorade.
Yeah, we did, certainly. Working with agencies in much different capacities than I did in those spaces. But I'm fortunate enough to be able to see agencies through the data lens, because so many agencies now own their own data assets. And so work very closely with the folks at Axiom and at Epsilon, and WPP is now starting to emerge with data assets and grow that AmeriLink asset. They're rebranding that and acquiring and doing new things. So it's really fun to help them think about their businesses and think about not only servicing their own advertisers within their agency world, but joining our marketplace so they can open up their opportunity more broadly as well. You are absolutely right that the trade desk was really built through this partnership with agencies, and we continue that mantra today. Things change, different perspectives come into play. We will always be connected to agencies because of the role that they play, and we would not be here without them. We want to continue that for sure.
I could even build a case that the work that you're doing with the agencies on data is probably one of the strongest pillars to maintain that commitment.
I think you're right. I think agencies understand the impact that their owned data assets can have, both for the performance of their advertisers, but also for their own top and bottom line. And so they're obviously very invested in building out assets that are going to be effective for both of those purposes. And they've done really, really well in that instance.
I also think it's possible that the work you're doing with agencies, combined with the work you're doing with companies like Dstillery, could actually create the flywheel again for the trade desk.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. And, measurement is such an important part of what we want to bring forward. Dstillery is not a measurement company, but measurement helps validate the effectiveness of specific targeting strategies and specific partners. And whether that's Dstillery or an agency-owned asset, we want to help advertisers see the effectiveness of the targeting that our partners can deliver and the decisioning that the trade desk can bring forward on the backs of that data.
So let me ask you a question about culture.
Yeah.
Because you've seen 4 cultures, 5.
Yeah.
What were the characteristics of the most powerful culture?
Yeah.
And how have you tried to bring those to the trade desk?
Yeah. Transparency, openness, and honesty are the mark of a good culture. And I was so thrilled when I joined the trade desk. I remember receiving the welcome packet maybe 2 weeks before I joined, and they had postcards of our core values written out and explanations of what they are. They're things like grit and humility, and it's just so wonderful to see that a company was dedicated to that type of thing, and they were helping me by welcoming me in that way to make sure that I understood that before I even walked in the door. And so that was quite a contrast with some other big companies for whom I worked, where that was sometimes an afterthought. I've really tried to bring that forward with the team that I run. I now manage about 50 people in my organization, and I consider myself to be highly empathetic, and I want my people to feel like they are safe in this space, that they can take risks, that they can make decisions, that they can learn from making mistakes. Because if you're always looking over your shoulder, you're gonna be overly conscious, and you're not gonna perform the way that you need to perform. And so I've observed that from many of my leaders here at the trade desk. I've tried to emulate that experience. We have a very purpose-driven leader at the top of our company who's made a lot of decisions and choices and directions. He's certainly tough. He certainly pushes the company in certain areas, but he is willing to listen to people. Recently, I've had the opportunity to spend a lot more time with him, and it's really thrilling to be in those types of environments where I can say, well, I think about it this way, or I think about it that way. And that's a consideration and a conversation that we get to have. And it's just, great to have that permeate through the whole organization.
It's great to hear that. The New York Knicks, who just won the NBA Final Championship, one of their stars, Karl Anthony Towns, said something in the interview that the coach hears them out.
He said what?
Hears them out.
Yes, hears them out. Yes.
And that's a great leadership characteristic, because leaders don't know everything, but they can know a lot more if they listen.
Yeah, I love that. Leaders don't know everything, and that is exactly what I bring to my team. I have a level of GMs that are dedicated to specific product areas, and I tell them all the time, they're the ones who actually know. I'm just the one that kind of points them in the right direction.
It's great.
I love for them to do that.
If you had to tell an agency how best to leverage their trade desk relationship, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I would ask them to open themselves up a bit more broadly to the opportunities within the marketplace that we've brought forward. I mean, we have so many wonderful data partners who put a lot of time and energy into creating very, very valuable segments, which to us means that they're both relevant and priced effectively. I understand the demands of agency businesses and the reasons that they promote many of their own assets. But for me, it should always be about advertiser performance. And so I would like to see them create the right balance between how they want to run and how they can optimize for advertisers and ensure that they're bringing that forward.
Sounds like you're back to honesty, integrity, and transparency.
Yeah, I like those things a lot.
And what would you tell a data partner as to how to best work with you and your team?
Yeah, great question. I love data partners who can take the information that we give them. They can work with that. They can test. They can tune things one way or another to understand how they can deliver that best outcome for advertiser. And then they can bring back to us feedback, what they see is working, what they see is not working, and where they have gaps in their information that we can go help them fill. We have an incredibly complex machine. When we're talking about 20 million ad opportunities that we're considering every second, and then when we're bidding on those things and we're using different data elements to inform that, we have to consider each one of those impressions individually and figure out how we're going to not only decision, but compensate. Because of that complexity, it's hard to do what I just said, which is take our information and try to tune. And so we want to create a system where everybody's winning, where the advertiser gets the best performance, the data partner understands how to optimize towards that to maximize their revenue, and then the trade desk is making a little money along the way as well. But if any one of the links in those chain is broken, then you breed bad behavior. And we want optimal behavior, and that's founded on the back of the best information. And we're not providing it, we need to be told. So the company that you are on the board for, I will say, is one of the best out there in terms of taking the information, testing, and feeding back, even directly to me. I've had many, many lunches with your CEO about what's working and what's not working. And I greatly value those conversations because it just makes us all better.
Well, they value the partnership. I have one last question.
Mm-hmm.
As you think about the future of AI in agencies, what do you think is the most important thing they need to do to become competitive?
Yeah. The lens that I look through is the application of AI to create the perfect target. I think that the notion of a marketplace with syndicated segments sitting on shelves just ripe for the picking for somebody to fit a brief is the old way of thinking about things. And so I think AI can do a much better job of creating something custom for the moment and then also adjusting as things go along. It's so wonderful to come to this conference because you talk to partners and they educate and remind about access to data that they have, and it's all changing. Even conversations this year are different from last year where AI searching has become so predominant and search terms are now captured, and those are predictive signals for things. And so AI should be deployed to observe those and make adjustments as we are going, not only for segment creation, but for optimization. And so agencies should be thinking about those things. They should be open to companies like ours who are deploying those types of things to drive decisioning, and they should go get the data assets that help plug into there.
Jay Goebel, thank you for what you're doing for the industry, what you're doing for the agency groups, and what you're doing for data partners like Dstillery. Pleasure to spend time together.
Thank you. I appreciate you.